Hello everyone, my name is Bill Tillier and I'm from Calgary, Alberta. Today I'm going to be presenting a view of Dabrowski's introduction to the theory based on an unpublished manuscript that he wrote in the mid-70s. The manuscript looked at the theory of disintegration from the perspective of philosophy. I'd like to dedicate the presentation to Marlene Rankel and Patrick Thauberger. I have fond memories of Marlene and Pat playing music at Marlene's house, and I miss them both very much. I'd like to thank the organizers for accepting my proposal and creating the opportunity for me to speak to everyone at this important conference. The conferences have been an important part of my life in the past, and I miss being able to attend them. But unfortunately, they won't let me fly. So that makes it tricky. This manuscript was obtained by Amanda Harper, and Amanda obtained it from the National Archives in Ottawa, Ontario. Reading the manuscript reminded me of the way Dabrowski taught the theory when I learned it from him. In 1978, Dabrowski taught a 600-level course in the psychology department at the University of Alberta, where he taught the theory, and I was lucky enough to be a student of that course and also attend the weekly seminars he gave. This introduction illustrates our need to be comprehensive and recognize the breadth of the theory when describing it. The numbers in brackets refer to the slides later in the handout, where the supportive quotations are offered from the manuscript. Dabrowski emphasizes that integrated people, that is to say, people at the primary level of development, level 1, operate smoothly in life and are usually successful. They have no problem getting jobs, marriage partners, friends, and even responsible positions. But Dabrowski emphasizes that this sociality is superficial and that they display very intense egotism and narrow, self-serving, uni-level values and primitive instincts. Integrated individuals suffer less but cause others to suffer more. They're only interested in themselves and furthering their own agenda. Many of these people are adept at learning how the system operates and promoting their own self-interests, often at the expense of those around them, their families, their co-workers. Dabrowski says that those who do undergo disintegration tend to be nervous people with increased psychic excitability and are usually gifted or even outstandingly gifted. This is the first time that I can recall seen Dabrowski emphasize so clearly the link to gifted. Dabrowski notes that those who disintegrate are sensitive to others and tend to be brave and generous individuals who are ready and willing for self-sacrifice. They are sensitive, empathetic, and creative people who usually have intense inner conflicts and even suicidal tendencies, often suffering many crises and breakdowns. This emphasizes the role of disintegrative symptoms in development. States of disequilibrium, nervousness, psychoneurosis are the primary forms of positive or accelerated development in those people who have developmental potential. Shocks and stress will be associated with accelerating development. Development also involves protective forces that help guide individuals through disequilibrium and protect them from complete dissolution or psychosis. Developmental and protective forces constitute the inner psychic milieu that allows the person to reshape themselves to a higher state of harmony, what Dabrowski refers to as secondary integration. Developmental potential is the summation of positive and negative elements that together constitute the first factor of development. The main nuclei of the developmental potential are found in interests and abilities and a hierarchical inner psychic milieu. The different forms of increased psychic excitability constitute the basis of a multidimensional, multi-level grasp of reality. I think that's important to consider for a moment. The overexcitabilities, and in this manuscript, Dabrowski does use the term overexcitability. The overexcitabilities are not simply increasing our feelings and experiences. They are a window to a different kind of experience, to a multi-level experience of reality. The second factor is the social environment. Dabrowski emphasizes that the second factor depends upon the strength and character of the first. If the first factor is strongly positive or negative, the impact of the second factor will be negligible. The third factor contains many subdynamisms that begin to develop and act at the third level of development, the level of spontaneous, multi-level disintegration. The third factor is a dynamism of continuous choice in both the internal and external environment. Psychic excitability, a term that Dabrowski uses here synonymously with nervousness, is increased sensitivity toward the multi-levels of reality, as I said before. It's a window into a new experience of fundamental reality. It is an excessively stronger than normal reactivity to both external and internal stimulation. Excitability creates long-lasting reactions and allows the creation of strong engrams that quickly undergo ekphory. So this indicates that if you have strong excitability, you'll also have a very sensitive and comprehensive memory, and that your memory will be able to easily retrieve material based on sensory and other cues. The reactions and subsequent energy involved are specific to the type and structure of the particular mixture of excitabilities you have. The combination of the different types of excitability marks great psychic richness. Especially if you have all five, and especially if emotional is number one. Dabrowski gives examples of each overexcitability, which I include in the handout. This is an interesting quote. Dabrowski says that on a high level, it's inconceivable that high intellectual overexcitability could exist in isolation from imaginational and emotional. That's a bit of a conundrum for us, because the last 30 years of testing have not been able to demonstrate those three in combination. Dabrowski says that even at the lowest levels, psychoneuroses build the inner psychic milieu and create subject-object. Psychoneuroses creates a feeling of duality within ourselves, feelings of higher and lower, feelings of being torn between alternatives, and feelings of heterogeneity in the psychic structure that create dissonance and stress. On a high level, psychoneuroses introduce multi-level conflicts, and this creates a hierarchization of our inner psychic milieu, where literally we become aware of the vertical nature of conflicts, and this contributes to introducing autonomous factors and in bringing out and developing our human essence as an individual. Dabrowski says that nervousness, psychic excitability, and psychoneuroses represent the potentials to discover new realities, to discover the inner psychic milieu, and that they highlight the importance of internal stimuli. Together, they are the basis of what Dabrowski calls developmental jumps. The dynamisms of psychoneurosis awaken and develop a multidimensional and multilevel attitude toward reality. A couple of slides ago, we saw the same line in reference to excitability. So, if you read this manuscript, Dabrowski affords the same importance to psychoneurosis as he does to over-excitability. Reality consists of levels of subjective, objective, multidimensional, and multilevel elements, and the higher level individual has an experience of these different multilevel elements. Dabrowski emphasizes that psychology would be humanized if it accepted the idea of an inner psychic milieu. The inner psychic milieu increases self-awareness and responsibility towards oneself and the I that one feels one ought to be. Dabrowski notes that psychopaths are moral dwarfs with no idea of what ought to be. They only are concerned with what they want. On the fourth level, an individual consciously takes control of their fate and consciously organizes their hierarchy of dynamisms, reflecting their own individual understanding of their values and essence. Personality ideal consists of two essences. One, a common essence reflected in our attitude towards others through responsibility and empathy, and an individual essence that represents our own unique and unrepeatable traits that make up our individual and unique personality. Subject-object makes us aware of our imperfections, and this allows us to reshape and refashion them by objectively seeing where we must go, and at the same time subjectively feeling and understanding the pain and fear involved in our own development. This understanding allows us to empathize and be compassionate toward others, and this allows us to help others. Subject-object works with our disintegration. Our memory of our own developmental struggle allows us to see others as subjects and allows us to see the bigger picture and allow us to sacrifice our own needs in favor of the needs of others. This creates a fundamentally new and different approach to society compared to those individuals at the primary level. Dabrowski often talked about life being a drama and used the analogy of life being like actors on a stage, learning their individual roles and playing them out. Here, Dabrowski talks about the drama of the meaning of life. And he says that it doesn't exist in primitive integration. At the primary level, the meaning of life does not exist because it requires a hierarchy within oneself, within the inner psychic milieu, and it requires subject-object, what Dabrowski refers to as the germs of essence. In this stark passage, Dabrowski says that these germs represent either the nuclei of positive or or negative potential for development, and lead either to mental illness and suicide or to the development of the personality ideal and one's essence. Dabrowski says that any other possibilities are difficult to imagine. So here we have a very stark reality that for Dabrowski, development was really an all or none kind of situation. Here, Dabrowski says that personality is self-objectified, a term used here for the first time in English. The third factor must act with self-awareness. Self-awareness arises from moral crises, that is to say, vertical crises, and through efforts to transform oneself. Dabrowski often said that all development was inhibition. Here he emphasizes that to develop, one must subordinate oneself to the personality ideal and to see the path that you ought to take through retrospection and prospection. This involves being a feeling of being pitted against yourself. Reflecting an earlier slide, you feel that duality. You want to do one thing, but you feel that you ought to do something else. And that feeling of duality must be resolved by subordinating yourself to the higher, to the personality ideal that you aspire to. Self-knowledge always implies the operation of subject-object and the division of values into a hierarchy. This allows us to become aware of and see, and thus free ourselves from lower instincts and ego. The higher one's development, the more objective one's self-knowledge becomes, and thus the greater capacity to understand others. And I would also add here that this creates a feeling of humility, because when you have an objective view of yourself. It encourages you to be a very humble person. Autonomy involves independence from lower instinctive dynamisms, which become non-essential and even negative. Dabrowski emphasizes that to educate oneself requires seeing yourself split into subject and object. And self-education is really the birth of personality. This presentation has not touched on the core of the book, which is a philosophical discussion of the theory. In summary, I think that this manuscript illustrates that the theory is more than just one element, and that we need to understand that developmental potential involves several different key aspects that all need to be considered when we think about what the ingredients are for development. I think that this is an important manuscript, and I hope someday that it's published. I'd like to again thank the organizers for accepting my proposal and allowing me the opportunity to speak to everyone. Thank you very much. Until next time.